Welcome to Mr. Horror, where we bring you the scariest stories that will make your skin crawl. Buckle up, because we're about to take you on a terrifying journey. When I was a kid, I loved playing hide and seek with my friends. It was always so thrilling to hide and hope that nobody would find you, and the rush of adrenaline you felt when you were finally discovered was almost addictive. But one summer, my friends and I took things too far. We decided to play hide and seek in an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, a house that had been rumored to be haunted for years. The house was nestled deep in the woods, and we had to hike for miles just to reach it. By the time we got there, we were already spooked. The overgrown trees and the rustling of leaves in the wind seemed to be whispering warnings to us. But we shrugged it off and started the game. At first, it was fun. We all scrambled to find the perfect hiding spot, giggling and whispering as we waited for the seeker to come find us. But as the minutes turned into hours, something strange started to happen. The seeker seemed to be taking longer and longer to find us, even though we were sure we weren't hiding that well. And then we heard the whispers, faint at first, but growing louder and more distinct by the minute. They seemed to be coming from all around us, as if the very walls of the house were speaking to us. At first, we thought it was just our imaginations playing tricks on us, but the whispers grew more insistent, more urgent. They seemed to be calling us, beckoning us deeper into the house. We tried to leave, but the doors and windows had all mysteriously locked from the outside. We were trapped, with no way out. As the night wore on, things got worse. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own. It was like the very air was alive with malevolent energy, and we were all caught in its grip. We huddled together, trying to stay warm and safe, but it was no use. The horrors of the house had already claimed us. We were trapped, doomed to wander its endless halls forever. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The doors and windows unlocked, and we stumbled outside into the early morning light, shaken but alive. But the game never really ended. To this day, I can hear the whispers in my head, and I can feel the cold touch of the shadows on my skin. I don't think I'll ever truly escape that house or the horrors we unleashed inside of it. For years, I tried to convince myself that what happened in that house was just a trick of the mind, a game that had gone too far, but the whispers never left me, and the fear never really went away. As I got older, I became obsessed with the idea of uncovering the truth behind that night. I pored over old newspaper articles and police reports, searching for any clues that might explain what had really happened. And then, one day, I found it, a small mention in the obituary section of the local paper, the death of the house's former owner, a man named Jacob Wright. According to the article, Wright had died of natural causes in the very same house where we had played our game of hide and seek. But what caught my attention was the mention of his family, a wife and 2 young children, who had all disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The whispers, the shadows, the feeling of being trapped, it all made sense. The house was haunted by the ghosts of the Wright family, still seeking justice for their untimely demise. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to that house, and I had to confront the ghosts of the past. I packed a backpack with some supplies and set out on the long hike to the house, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. When I arrived, I could feel the energy of the house pulsing around me, like a living thing. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was determined to uncover the truth and to give the Wright family the justice they deserved. As I explored the dusty halls and cobweb-covered rooms, I could feel their presence growing stronger. The whispers and screams echoed around me, but this time, I knew they were not meant to scare me. They were meant to guide me, to help me find the truth. And then, in a small, forgotten room at the end of a dark hallway, I found it. A hidden panel in the wall containing a stash of old photographs and letters. The letters told the story of Jacob Wright's descent into madness and his eventual murder of his wife and children. Tears streamed down my face as I read the words, feeling the pain and sorrow of the Wright family as if it were my own. But I knew that I had done what needed to be done. I had uncovered the truth, and I had given the Wright family the justice they had been denied for so many years. As I left the house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The whispers were gone, replaced by a feeling of warmth and acceptance. And even though the ghosts of the past would always haunt that house, I knew that they had finally found the rest they had been seeking for so long. After that day, I never went back to the house. But the memory of what happened stayed with me like a scar on my soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been changed forever by my encounter with the ghosts of the Wright family. But over time, I began to realize that the experience had also given me a gift. I had been given the ability to see beyond the surface, to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the lies and deceptions of the world. And so, I devoted my life to helping others find the truth, to uncovering the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world. I became a private investigator, using my skills to help people find closure and justice in the face of tragedy. And even though the memories of that night still haunted me, I knew that I had found my purpose in life. I had found a way to use my pain to help others, to make a difference in the world. Years passed, and I grew old, but the memory of that night never left me. It stayed with me like a reminder of the darkness that lay just beneath the surface of the world. And yet, even as I grew old and frail, I never lost my sense of purpose. I knew that as long as there were secrets to uncover and justice to be found, my work would never be done. And so, as I lay on my deathbed, surrounded by the love and warmth of my family, I knew that I had lived a life of meaning and purpose. I had confronted my fears and had used my pain to help others find peace. As my eyes slowly closed for the final time, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest, and I knew that I had done what I could to make the world a better place. And even though I would soon be gone, I knew that my legacy would live on, a legacy of truth, justice, and the courage to confront the darkness that lay hidden within us all. It was a warm summer evening, and my friends and I were looking for something to do. We had exhausted all our usual hangouts, and were in the mood for something different. That's when someone suggested playing hide and seek in the old abandoned factory on the edge of town. At first, we were all hesitant. The old factory had been abandoned for years and was rumored to be haunted. But the thrill of the unknown was too much to resist, and before we knew it, we were all in the factory, hiding and seeking. It was my turn to be the seeker, and as I made my way through the dark, dusty factory, I could feel the weight of its history bearing down on me. The walls were covered in graffiti, and the floor was littered with broken glass and debris. As I made my way deeper into the factory, I heard a noise. It was faint, but I could hear the sound of someone breathing. I called out to my friends, but there was no response. The breathing continued, growing louder and more frantic. My heart was pounding in my chest as I followed the sound, my flashlight shaking in my hand. And then I saw her, a young girl, no more than 10 years old, huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. I approached her slowly, trying to calm her down, but she just stared at me, her eyes full of terror. And then she disappeared, as if she had never been there at all. I was shaken to my core, and I immediately went to find my friends. But they were all gone, vanished into thin air. I called out to them, but there was no response. The only sound was the rustling of the wind through the broken windows. I knew that something was wrong, that something was very, very wrong. And so, with my heart in my throat, I began to make my way back through the factory, searching for any sign of my friends. But as I made my way through the maze of broken machinery and rusted metal, I could feel the darkness closing in around me. I knew that I was not alone in the factory, that there was something there, something sinister and malevolent, lurking in the shadows. And so, with every step, I braced myself for what was to come, knowing that I might not make it out alive. I continued to make my way through the dark factory, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of my own breathing echoed in the empty space, and the only light came from my flashlight, which shook in my trembling hand. As I turned a corner, I saw something move in the shadows. It was a figure, a human figure, and I could see the outline of a man's body. I called out to him, thinking it might be one of my friends, but there was no response. Instead, the figure began to move towards me, slowly at first, then faster and faster. I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead. The figure was closing in, and I could feel its breath on my neck. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head, and everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. I tried to stand up, but my body was weak and unsteady. That's when I realized that I was trapped. Something was holding me down, preventing me from moving. I looked around, and that's when I saw them, my friends, bound and gagged, lying in a corner of the room. They were alive, but barely, and their eyes were wide with fear. I tried to call out to them, to comfort them, but my voice was weak and hoarse. I knew that we were in serious trouble, that whoever had trapped us was not going to let us go without a fight. I struggled against my restraints, trying to break free, but it was no use. Whoever had done this had planned it well, and they were not going to let us go without a fight. As the hours ticked by, we sat there in silence, waiting for our fate to be decided. The darkness crept in around us, and the only sound was the soft, rhythmic breathing of our captor. But then something changed. The sound of footsteps echoed through the factory, and the door to our prison creaked open. I looked up, half expecting to see our captor, but instead I saw a glimmer of hope. It was the police, responding to a call about suspicious activity in the abandoned factory. They had come just in time to save us, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We were taken to the hospital, where we were treated for our injuries and given the opportunity to speak to the police. We told them everything about the hide-and-seek game, about the figure we had seen in the shadows, about our captivity. But no one was ever caught. The police searched the factory, but there was no sign of our captor. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the memory of our terrifying ordeal. To this day, I am haunted by the memory of that night, of the fear and desperation we felt, of the unknown figure who trapped us in the darkness. And I know that I will never forget the lesson that we learned that night, that the world is a dark and dangerous place, full of unspeakable horrors lurking in the shadows. After the night we were trapped in the abandoned factory, my friends and I never spoke of it again. We went our separate ways, trying to put the memory behind us and move on with our lives. But the memory lingered, haunting us in the quiet moments when we were alone with our thoughts. We all struggled with nightmares, with the fear that something like that could happen again. For me, the experience changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I became hyper-vigilant, constantly on the lookout for danger. I struggled to trust people, always wondering if they had something sinister lurking beneath the surface. It took me years to come to terms with what had happened that night, to accept that the world was not always a safe place. But eventually, I found a way to move on, to find a sense of peace in the midst of the chaos. I turned to therapy, seeking the help of a trained professional to help me work through my trauma. Through therapy, I was able to process my experience, to understand why it had affected me so deeply, and to learn how to cope with the fear and anxiety that it had left behind. I also found solace in writing, using my experience to create stories that explored the darker side of human nature. I found that by sharing my story with others, I was able to help them process their own experiences of trauma and to give them a sense of hope that they too could find a way to move forward. In the end, I learned that even the most terrifying experiences can be transformed into something positive, something that can help us grow and heal. And while I will never forget the horror of that night in the abandoned factory, I am grateful for the lessons it taught me and for the strength and resilience it helped me to find within myself. It was a typical Saturday night with my group of friends. We were all hanging out at my friend's house, trying to come up with something to do. That's when someone suggested we play hide and seek. At first, we all laughed at the idea, thinking it was something we hadn't done since we were kids. But as the night wore on and we grew bored with our usual routine, we decided to give it a try. We set some basic rules. The seeker would count to 100 while the rest of us scattered to find hiding places throughout the house. The last person to be found would be the winner. As we began to play, the game quickly became intense. We all wanted to win, and we were all determined to find the best hiding spots. It was all fun and games until it was my turn to be the seeker. I began counting to 100 as the others scurried off to hide. When I finished counting, I started searching the house, checking all the usual hiding spots. But as time went on, I realized that no one was jumping out to say gotcha. It was as if they had all disappeared. I called out their names, but there was no response. My heart began to race as I imagined all sorts of terrifying scenarios. What if they were hurt or trapped somewhere in the house? What if someone had broken in and taken them? As I frantically searched every inch of the house, I began to notice that things were not quite as they seemed. Doors that had been opened before were now closed, and vice versa. Objects were moved from their usual places, as if someone had been there and then vanished. It was at that moment that I realized I was not alone in the house. Someone or something was playing a game with me, and it was a game that I wasn't sure I wanted to win. As the game of hide and seek turned into something much more sinister, my heart raced with fear. I realized that something was very wrong in my friend's house, and I needed to find my way out before it was too late. I continued to search for my friends, calling out their names as I went. But the house remained silent, with no response to my pleas. It was as if everyone had disappeared into thin air. As I turned a corner, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a figure darting down a hallway and disappearing around a corner. I could hear the soft thud of footsteps, but when I followed them, there was no one there. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind, but I knew I had to keep moving and find a way out of the house. I made my way towards the front door, hoping to escape the nightmare that had become our game of hide and seek. But as I reached for the doorknob, I found it wouldn't budge. It was as if the door was locked from the other side. I turned around to look for another way out, but what I saw made me freeze in fear. There, standing in front of me, was a figure draped in shadows. It was tall, with long arms and legs, and a face that seemed to be contorted into a grotesque smile. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure began to move towards me, slowly at first, but then with increasing speed. I turned to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the ground. Just as the figure was about to reach me, everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. The doctors told me I had suffered a panic attack and had been found unconscious in my friend's house. But I knew that wasn't the whole truth. I had experienced something that couldn't be explained by science or medicine. It was something that would haunt me for the rest of my days. After my terrifying experience at my friend's house, I tried to move on with my life. But the memories of that night continued to haunt me, always lurking in the back of my mind. Years went by, and I had long since lost touch with the friends I had played hide and seek with. But then, one day, I received a strange package in the mail. Inside was a small note, written in a handwriting that was eerily familiar. It simply read, "I never forgot about you." I was immediately overcome with fear and dread. Had my experience in the house somehow connected me to something sinister? Had my tormentor been watching me all these years, waiting for the right moment to strike? As the days passed, I became increasingly paranoid. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if the figure from that night would come back to haunt me once again. And then, one night, it did. I was home alone, watching TV, when I heard a noise in the hallway. It was a soft thud, like someone had dropped something on the ground. I cautiously made my way down the hallway, my heart racing with fear. As I turned the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, standing in front of me, was the same figure from that fateful night. Its grotesque smile seemed even wider now, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if I was frozen in place, unable to escape the horror that was unfolding before me. As the figure advanced towards me, I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember is the sound of my own screams echoing through the house. When I woke up, I was once again in a hospital bed, but this time there was no explanation for what had happened. The doctors told me that I had suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, but I knew that it was something far more sinister. I realized that I would never be able to escape the horrors that had started with a simple game of hide and seek. They would follow me for the rest of my life, haunting my every waking moment. And so, I resigned myself to a life of fear and paranoia, forever haunted by the memory of that terrifying night. Thank you for watching this scary true hide and seek horror stories. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more scary horror stories. And if you want to be notified when we upload new videos, don't forget to hit that bell icon. See you in the next video, and may you never have to play hide and seek with something that goes bump in the night.